I'm pretty successful. I managed to get my own house and everything. So, when my sister and her husband fell into some hard times, I said, you know what? You can stay with me just long enough to get your feet back underneath you, save up a little money, and possibly go get an apartment or figure something out. Well, guys, what I did not realize is that this was going to turn into an absolute nightmare. Months they stayed here, and I just had a few rules for them. The biggest rule was, do not use my bathroom. There's 3 bathrooms in the house, 1 directly in the room I let them stay in. So why are they going upstairs to the master bedroom to use mine? When I say please don't do it, I have this weird thing about sharing bathrooms. So get this. I come home from work early because I forgot something, so I turned my car around and went home, and I see my sister's husband butt naked inside of my bathroom about to take a luxury bath with all my stuff. So I tell him this. I have a dilemma. I took my sister and her husband in after they fell on hard times, but they've made my life absolutely miserable, and I'm contemplating putting them on the street. For a little bit of backstory, I've been on my own for most of my life. I became semi-independent at the age of 18 when I got a full ride to a university across the country. I stayed there and did several internships before going back to college to pursue my master's. I was lucky to find a job with great benefits and a great tech company with bosses who don't make me question my life decisions. When I turned 30 years of age, I'd already amassed a decent amount of savings and begun hunting for a starter home. I mentioned it casually before a company meeting, and one of my superiors told me he had a small home he was trying to get rid of and was willing to let it go for a little cheaper than the asking price. It was a 2-bedroom, a bit of a fixer-upper, but I saw its potential. So, we struck a deal, and I've been slowly paying it off and fixing it up over the last 2 years. I converted the dining room into a home office since the kitchen already had a breakfast bar, and I'd been living there alone for the foreseeable future. The basement is more of a den with a big TV and a comfy couch. I mostly just use it during the sports season. I also have a spare room for guests, and I've been slowly collecting the materials to build a deck. All in all, I'm happy with what I've accomplished. I know most of it was due to luck. I was fortunate to have found a great job at a good company with sensible leadership. My home has really been coming together, and the fixer-upper is almost done. My parents have been over a few times when they were in the state visiting, and my aunt, and they're just super proud of everything I've accomplished. Father even offered to help me out with the deck, if needed, but I'd prefer to do it on my own. I've always been fiercely independent. Plus, my parents are retired, and I'd rather them use their money to enjoy their later years. Wow, this leads me to the meat of the story. About a year ago, my sister Laura and her husband Pete fell into a bit of financial issue. Pete's lost his job during the pandemic, which meant that they had to rely on their savings to keep up with the mortgage and bills, while he found something else. My sister was still in college full-time and did not want to drop out to find a job. Unfortunately, he was not able to find a job, and they fell behind on their mortgage. The bank refused to strike a deal with them, so they literally foreclosed on the house and gave them 90 days to get out. My parents called me in an absolute panic, saying Laura and Pete were going to end up homeless, and they just begged me to take them in and assured me it would just be for a little while. Laura would be graduating from college soon and could get a job, and Pete could find something temporary. They just needed some time to get back on their feet, you know. I did not want my sister out on the street, especially if I could help it. So I told her and Pete they could have my spare room until they could find a place of their own, and they'd have to put most of their furniture in storage. My house is a good size, but it's not really that big. Anyways, they moved in about a month later, and I set them up in my guest room. I didn't really set any ground rules. except that they have to clean up after themselves, which they were good about, and not to go into my room or bathroom without express permission, which they were good about up until a point. I'll say they were super grateful to me in the beginning and promised that they'd only need me for 6 months. Pete already had some job interviews lined up anyways, and the issue was that there were lower paying jobs, which was why they needed a bit of time to save up. I mean, yeah, that's fine. At that time, I didn't expect them to be so selfish and entitled, you know? I'd always gotten along with my sister when we were children, so to see this shift was very disheartening, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. My grievances with them started off with things that are generally harmless. You know, them touching or consuming things I specifically told them not to. They were also very apologetic when I confronted them about it, but kept doing it anyways. It got to the point where I started keeping my snacks in a box in my bedroom. About 2 weeks into their stay, my sister commented on the fact that I keep my shoes by the front door. She thought it was weird. Well, to be clear, my shoes aren't just, strewn around the entrance in a hazardous way. They're on a shoe rack, and next to the rack is a bench where I sit to put them on or take them off. The reason for this is before I fixed my garage, I used to park out front and the front yard would get muddy, dusty, and my shoes would be caked in them by the time I reached the front door. I don't have this problem anymore, not at all, but it's still not good to be tracking all these disgusting outside germs around the house, you know. I explained all this to my sister. So, tell me why I come home one day and met my shoe rack on my shoes missing. She took it to my room and shoved it into my closet, and when I asked her why, she said she thought it was gross that I kept them by the door, and that the first thing people would see and smell when they walked in were my shoes. First of all, my feet do not stink. I made sure of it. Second, I have friends over here at least once a month, and none of them have ever said anything or complained. In fact, one of them said he'd start doing the same, but one thing about my sister, when she's dead set on something, she absolutely refuses to budge, so we argued for about an hour before I relented. I still take my shoes off at the door, I just carry them in my room, and I've also put the shoe rack next to the bedroom door. The adjustment period was so annoying. I kept sitting by the entrance to take off my shoes only to realize the rack was not there anymore. Sometimes I'd leave my shoes at the door out of sheer spite. The second incident, though, happened not long after that, and once a month, usually on a Sunday, I would have some friends over and we would watch what other sports balls playing on the TV. This time, it was football. Someone brings pizza, someone brings beer, and I provide the venue, cups, plates, etc. I told my sister and Pete in advance, invited them to join if they wanted. I even made sure there were non-alcoholic options because I know my sister doesn't really like to drink. Anyways, my friends came over and we all go down into the basement. You see, I started passing out plates and cups. When I get to my sister, she says this: "I'm not eating off of plastic." Ugh, I don't bother to ask why. I didn't care. I just told her, go upstairs, get a plate then. Well, she argued that we should not be eating off them either because it's bad for the environment, and, they cut down trees to make plastics and plates and cups, and she also said I told her that not eating out of paper plates was not going to stop global warming, and sat down. She kind of huffed and puffed in the corner for a while before Pete went upstairs to get her a plate and a cup. Then she refused to eat the pizza because it had pork on it. I told her there were plain cheese slices too, but she didn't want those because whoever touched the pork probably contaminated the cheese slices. I mean, come on. On top of that, she spent the entire night talking over the game like a hyperactive toddler. What's first down? Who's that guy? Why didn't he throw it to the other person? This game doesn't make sense. I mean, she literally killed the whole vibe. Normally, me and my friends would be commenting on what happened, but they were just dead silent the whole time. Except for near the halfway point, halftime, where one of them told my sister that, hey, Google's free. Well, that shut her up for a while. I asked her if she wanted to go upstairs and watch something else, and she just simply said no. It wasn't really this incident that ticked me off, though, but what grew out of it. The next day, she told me that my friends are simply rude and that I should not invite them back. I told her they weren't being rude, she was just being annoying while they were trying to enjoy the game, and she gets mad and says, "Well, you're just taking their side." I told her to grow up. A few weeks later, I messaged our group to ask them if they were coming over for the Sunday game. I promised them my sister wouldn't be there, and they said I told them a month ago that I would not be hosting anymore because my sister felt uncomfortable with them. What? I never said that. I scrolled up to a month prior, and guys, there were messages from me telling them we should meet at a bar or something instead, and my friends had said they were fine with that since my sister was so annoying anyways, which meant Laura somehow got into my phone, and yeah, I do charge my phone in the kitchen sometimes, so that's where she probably grabbed it, and I have no idea how she got a hold of my password, but I'll tell you right now, I was livid. I went to the room and just started screaming at her, saying it was a gross invasion of my privacy, and she tried to justify it by saying my friends are just extremely rude to her, and that they should not be allowed over here anymore. I told her simply, plain, this is my house, and she does not get to decide what is and isn't allowed. And let me tell you, she seemed to take that as a challenge because things only got progressively worse from there. She hid my lawnmower because I'd mow my lawn during her, quote, quiet meditation time. She meditates for 4 hours on Sunday morning, which is when I usually mow. When she complained about it being a bit too noisy, I told her she can go somewhere quiet to meditate, like most people go to a park. She did not take too kindly to that, and when I went to cut down the lawn the next week, the lawnmower was gone. But guys, it did not end there. She starts complaining that I've made too much noise early on the weekday mornings, and let me just tell you, her definition of making too much noise is me getting ready for work and making myself breakfast. She said I should just meal prep the night before so I would not have to make such a ruckus. On top of that, she started throwing out things that she deemed unfit for me to eat, and I'm talking pork, beef, my favorites. One day I come home to make myself a burger, only to find out she's thrown my ground beef into the trash. I lost it on her, threatened to throw her and Pete out if that's how they want to go. She started crying and just apologizing profusely, saying she was trying to look out for my health, yada yada yada. I sat them down for a family meeting to see where they were at with their savings, and they only had 1 more month of living with me at this point. I could not wait for them to be gone so I can eat a hamburger. Well, it turns out Pete had got a fast food job. It did not pay much, but it was enough for them to eat and set a little money aside for a lease on an apartment. So, I told them they'd better make the best of this next month and be gone by the 30th. 2 weeks go by after that, and I get a call from my parents. They're telling me that Laura and Pete may need more time because they still don't have enough money. I asked, how could they not have enough money? Pete makes more than minimum wage, and the only thing they had to buy was food. My mom said Pete had to help my sister with some college stuff, and only because my parents begged me and assured me it would be for no more than 3 months, so I said yes. I told my parents how Laura had been antagonizing me over the past 5 months, and they promised that they would talk a little bit of sense into her. Well, yeah, it did seem to work for the next few weeks after that. I did not have any complaints. But one day, I left the house in a rush and forgot my notebook in my room, and luckily, I was only 5 minutes away, so I spun back around to grab it, and when I walk into my room, I see Pete coming out of my bathroom, butt naked. In the beginning, the only rule I laid down was not to touch my stuff, not to go in my room, not to go in my bathroom. I was so angry I could only grab my book and walk out because if I did not, I was going to fight him right then and there. My sister started texting me saying that they only used it while I was gone to work and that I had the better bathroom and shower, complaining that the shower in their room was small. She tried to explain that they should be allowed to use it because they were my guest, and I should want them to feel welcome in my home. I didn't have the energy to answer her. I stopped on my way home, and I'd literally bought a deadlock for the door, wasting no time to install it, and my sister told me I was making them feel as though I did not want them around. Well, she was right. I did not want them around. I was just doing this because my parents literally begged me to. Anyways, there were 2 incidents that absolutely sealed their fate. The first happened at the end of their 6 months of staying with me, and I come home. Met a box truck in my driveway, and Pete and a friend of his were loading furniture into my garage. Well, I asked them what's going on here, and he explained that they'd only rented a storage unit for 6 months and simply needed somewhere else to store it. So, he figured, hey, we could just use my garage since it's always empty. I asked him if he's ever figured to ask me first, and he said he thought I wouldn't mind since I wasn't using it anyways, except, I was using it? Oh, well, it's where I park my car, He apologized and said it would only be for a little while, and he just needed a time to find somewhere else to store it. I told him, okay, buddy, you got 2 weeks, not a day more, not a day less, to get all this crap out. It was getting cold, and I did not want to be scraping ice off of my car every single morning. If he did not take the stuff out, he'd come home and meet them on the lawn. He promised me 2 weeks, no more. Well, lo and behold, 14 days go by, and they've made no effort to move their stuff, so I slipped a note under the door, telling them someone was coming to take their stuff out of the garage that evening, so they need to decide where it's going to go. My sister texted me, begging me to give them just 1 more week. Fine, but this is the only extension. I had people on speed dial ready to help me empty my garage. Well, a week rolls by, and I get home and I hear hammering coming from my backyard, and someone is out there knocking up some structure out of wood. But not just any wood, my wood. I've been saving up to build my deck with. I charged into the house in a fit of rage and start screaming at them both, and I told them everything I'd been holding in for the last 7 months. I told them I could wait to get them out of my house, and that they've been a thorn in my side ever since they moved in. I told my sister she's the absolute most selfish, insufferable, entitled human being I've ever dealt with, and that they made my life completely miserable from the moment they moved in. I said if I had a choice, I would have left them high and dry on the streets, homeless. I went into my room and slammed the door and spent the rest of my evening there. I get a call from my parents that night saying Laura had called her crying, saying that I was going to kick them out. My mother explained that Pete had asked one of his friends to make a storage shed just to keep their stuff in since I needed my garage for my car. I told her they never discussed this with me. They never discuss anything with me. They just assume that they can do whatever they please in my own house, and I told my mother this was the last straw. Laura and Pete needed to find somewhere else to live, and I didn't know how I was going to get them out since they never seemed to listen to me, but I'd figure something out. I can't live like this anymore. I need my life back, my house back, my sanity back. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Oh boy, today's story is a wild ride. I do have 3 updates for you guys, and I'll just tell you right now, update number 1 is crazy. pause the video right now, go down to the comment section and tell me, do you think OP is going to absolutely freak out and kick them out? Or do you think OP is going to be a little bit more chill when something happens? Well, let's just find out. And if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe for daily videos. And here is update number 1. So, I've been brainstorming ideas of how to get my sister and her husband out, and I decided to seek some legal advice. I haven't spoken to them since the storage shed incident, and it's been about a week, so they probably think I've cooled off and it's just water under the bridge. Well, they're wrong. I was just getting started. Since this whole debacle my sister caused a few months ago, I've been meeting with my friends at the local sports bar. One of them, Kendrick, was a lawyer, mostly for corporate stuff because, well, he's been expanding his knowledge into other fields, though. So I figured he could help me, and I told him about the woes I've been having with my sister and her husband. He asked me how long they've been living with me, and I said 6 months. He said he doesn't know much about the kind of law, but a buddy who works with him does, and that I should hang tight. He said the laws in our state tended to favor landlords over tenants, so I should be able to get them out easily if I took the legal route. But that was the extent of his knowledge, you know. Anyways, I went home that night feeling a little bit better about the whole situation, and I met my sister and Pete in the living room. They said we needed to talk, and I agreed, but told them, hey, not right now. I needed to sort some things out first, so that Monday morning after work, I got a call from Kendrick. He said he talked to his coworker, and he believes I have grounds to kick them out. In our state, if someone's living in your place without paying rent for 6 months, they're considered a squatter, and you can get a court order to have them actually removed. Kendrick told me that he had given his buddy my email address because he needed to know the exact details of the situation, and I just got home as fast as I could and met the email in my inbox. I gave him as much information as I could, and it took me about an hour to type it all up. Well, he emailed back and told me I had a solid case. It would take a bit, but I could get a court order to have them absolutely evicted. He told me to ask them nicely to leave first, though, while he worked on getting the papers together. So, I sat Laura and Pete down and told them we can't continue as we are. I asked Pete how much they'd saved up the last 7 months. He said $1,500, that's it. That's not even half of what they need to get an apartment. So I asked him where's all the money he was making, where's it going, and he looked at Laura. Heck, I looked at Laura. I asked her if the money was going towards college and how long it was going to be before she graduated. Y'all, she dropped out. She has not been going to college since before they moved in with me. Instead, she's been building a healthy lifestyle of TikTok that has all of 500 followers, and she's been spending Pete's money on healthy alternatives to everyday food for use for content, and I'm talking about extremely expensive alternate health. And she told Pete it was fine because I would not kick them out onto the streets and would give them as much time as they need to save up some money. So, her plan all along was to mooch off me until she became some kind of social media superstar. I told them I've heard enough. I told them they have 2 weeks to get out of my house. I want nothing to do with them anymore. I don't care where they go. I don't care where they went. They were homeless shelters everywhere in town if they were that desperate. Otherwise, they could beg Pete's family for help because I am done. My sister started screaming at me, saying I could not just kick them out onto the street. They literally had nowhere to go, and she called me heartless and insensitive, saying how I should be happy to support my little sister while she pursued her dreams. I was getting really tired of her telling me how I should feel. I just reiterated to them that they had 2 weeks, then got up and went to the bed. I expect them to think I'm bluffing, but little did they know this was me being cordial. Once I have those court papers in hand, all bets are off. Update number 2. So, Laura and her husband, their 2-week notice, it ended 3 days ago. As I predicted, they thought I was joking about giving them 2 weeks, and I noticed they did not start packing or making any real effort to find somewhere new to stay. Before the end of the 2 weeks, I get a court order giving them 7 days to evacuate the premises, and if they refuse to comply, literally, the police are going to be called and they, along with all their stuff, is going to be forcibly removed. At the end of the 2 weeks, I presented the documents to Laura and Pete, and it finally dawned on them that I was being serious. My sister immediately started begging me to stay, stammering over her words on the verge of tears. She asked me if it was about money because they'd be willing to pay rent if it's what I wanted. Her tears didn't even faze me. I told her I literally don't care at all about money. This was purely about respect, and I set these clear boundaries when I allowed them to move in with me, and they've made it a point to violate and cross those boundaries every single chance that they got. Well, I'm at my wit's end. I wasn't hearing any sad stories or caving to her little crocodile tears. Oh no. I told them I'd given them 2 weeks and they did not listen. Now they have 1. They've been on the phone for the past few days, calling around trying to either find someone to take them in or find someone to convince me to let them stay. I've already gotten a call from my parents and I told them right away that nothing was going to change my mind at this point. My dad is firmly on my side and said he would have done the same in my position. My mom is kind of on the fence. I think she understands where I'm coming from, but it's worrisome about Laura and Pete ending up on the streets. There's one person, though, who's on my sister's side. We have an aunt that lives about an hour away. She called me the other day to chew me out for kicking my sister and Pete out when they had nowhere else to go. She thought getting a court order was simply too far. But you know what she didn't do? Volunteer to take them in herself. All she did was call all manners of heartless and mean to me. For the record, I'm not very close with this aunt. I can count on one hand the number of times I've even met her in person. All I know is she spends a lot of time on Facebook and in other people's business, and she's self-proclaimed a devout Christian. I don't really care what she thinks. As of today, I found a bunch of big Home Depot boxes in my living room, and I can hear the sounds of packing and Sharpies. It's the best thing I've heard in the last 6 months. They have 4 days to be gone, and I have 4 days until my house is finally mine again. Update number 3. This is the final update. So, the last week has been very interesting. I don't think I'd have to update this story again, except to say I got them out of my home. I did, but not in the way I was expecting, so I've been paying a little more attention to social media, and I noticed that my aunt, the devout Christian from my last update, has been slandering me amongst our extended family. She's been telling people that I told my sister she could stay for as long as she likes and then turned around and got a court order to kick her out even though she's been helping me with rent and bills. I don't know who's been feeding her these lies, and quite frankly, I don't like that she's sticking her nose in business that simply does not concern her. But since she wants to be petty, I can be even more petty. When I got off work, I called my sister and asked her where they were going. She said they found some options, but nothing concrete, and they were planning to stay in a motel for a few days until they heard back from a few friends. I told them, well, I found a family member who luckily is offering to take you guys in, and I'd be home shortly to take them. When I got back, I met them in a box truck with their stuff in the driveway, and they had sold some of their furniture, so they did have less stuff to lug around and a bit more cash to find somewhere to stay. Something they should have done from the beginning, right? They threw their suitcases in the trunk, and Pete drove the box truck while I took Laura in my car. On the way, I told her how our aunt so graciously offered to take them in. It was the good Christian thing to do, after all. She had a home even more spacious than mine since her kids don't live at home anymore, and my cousins barely spoke to her because they found her absolutely insufferable. Anyways, an hour and a half later, we pull up to her house and I honk the horn before getting out and unloading the luggage. Imagine the shock on her face when she walks outside and sees us, and on top of that, my sister ran up and hugged her right away and thanked her so much for agreeing to take them in. Meanwhile, I was already pulling out of the driveway. As soon as I got to the traffic light, I made a quick Facebook post thanking her for taking my sister and brother-in-law in during their time of need. I made sure to tag all of my extended family members and my parents in it. My dad told me she called him later that day in an absolute fit of rage, saying how I dropped my sister off on her doorstep and how she does not have the capacity to take anybody in. This was the same person, by the way, who was bragging on Facebook that she would never deny a family member in need. And my father reminded her of that and asked her what Jesus would do. And she hung up the phone on him. Anyways, as soon as I got home, I moved my shoe rack right back down to my living room door. Then I invited my friends over to watch the game. Nobody complained about the paper plates or ruined the game with never-ending questions about what's a touchdown. It was the best night I'd had in the last 6 months. Alright guys, so this story just getting crazier and crazier. I have to say though, that move by OP to take, his sister and her husband all the way to his aunt's house, which by the way was the one who was making such a big deal about this on social media, I thought it was hilarious because his plan worked out so well. I mean, he dropped them off, started pulling out of the driveway right when she figured out what was going on, but he was a step further. He tagged every single person in the family, and I think that's icing on top because it basically gave the aunt absolutely no choice but to help. Let me know what you thought about this story, guys. Drop your opinions in the comment section, but I do have one question for you. If you were in OP's position and you know that you basically were trying to help out family, would you have lasted as long as OP did? Drop your comments down below, or would you have just blown up way before OP did? I would like to hear from you guys. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I post a story every single day. I hope to see you tomorrow. Have a fantastic day, and, it's cool to be kind. See ya!